Now that we know what angle 1 and angle 4 are, we can figure out what our angle 5 is, because 1, 4, and 5 make up supplementary angles. So if we take 180 and subtract our angle measure for 1, which is 75, and then subtract our angle measure for 4, which is 59, we'll find that the measure of angle 5 is 46 degrees. Once we know 5, we can also easily figure out the measure of angle 2 because 5 and 2 are vertical angles. So that gives us that angle 2 is also 46 degrees. Since we know angle 4, 4 and 3 are vertical angles, which means that angle 3 is 59 degrees. To figure out angle 9, again, we have a triangle in the middle here. So 5, 8, and 9 have to add together to 180 degrees because the triangle has 180 degrees with its angle measures. So if we subtract 46 and then we subtract 59, we find that the measure of angle 9 is 75. Once I know angle 9, I can figure out angle 14 because they're vertical angles. So the measure of angle 14 is also 75. And to figure out 10, 9 and 10 are supplementary angles, which means that if I subtract angle 9, which is 75 from 180, I get 105. Angle 10 and angle 13 are vertical angles, which also means that angle 13 is 105. So we're piecing everything together. Notice that I sort of focused on one area at a time. That makes it a little more manageable and not as overwhelming. Number 6, we're going to do the same exact thing. So they started with telling us that the measure of angle 7 is 38 and the measure of angle 10 is 102. So if we start with what we know, we can piece together everything else. Notice that we do have two sets of transversals again. So we have one going in one way and the other that's sort of a diagonal line. If we start with angle 7, they told us that 7 is 38 degrees. 7 and 5 are vertical angles, which means 5 is also 38 degrees. To find 6, I would subtract my 38 degrees from 180 to find that the measure of angle 6 is 142 degrees. Angle 6 and angle 8 are vertical angles, which means that 8 is also 142. So that takes care of one section. If I look at the other section with the measure of angle 10, 10 and 12 are my vertical angles, so that means the measure of angle 12 is also 102. To find the measure of angle 9, I'm going to subtract 102 from 180, and that gives me that angle 9 is 78 degrees, which also means that 11 is 78 degrees because they are vertical angles. Now that I know those two sections, I'm going to use the fact that I have my parallel lines and my transversal to find the others. So if I look at the 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm going to use my 9, 10, 11, 12 angles to figure out what 1, 2, 3, and 4 are. Angle 9 and angle 1 are corresponding angles, which means that 1 is going to be 78 degrees. Angle 1 and angle 3 are vertical angles, or if we're looking with angle 9 and angle 3 are alternate interior angles, which means it's also 78. To figure out number 2, I could use same side interior angles with angle 9. 9 and 2 have to add up to 180 degrees, which means that angle 2 is 102 degrees. Angle 2 and angle 4 are vertical angles, which means that it's also 102 degrees. To figure out angles 13, 14, 15, and 16, I'm going to use angles 5, 6, and 7, and 8 to figure that out. 6 and 13 are going to make up my supplementary angles. So I'm going to subtract 142 from 180 to get the measure of 13 to be 38 degrees. 13 and 15 are vertical angles, which means they're congruent. And then to find The measure for 14, 6, and 14 are corresponding angles. If they're corresponding, they're congruent, which means it's 142 degrees. And 14 and 16 are vertical, so 16 is also 142. Our last example for this section, I have this weirder shape. I have my trapezoid, and then I have some triangles, and I have my transversals and parallel lines. They told us that the measure of angle 2 is 41 degrees, and they told us that the measure of angle 5 is 94 degrees. And this time they gave us a third example, so they said that the measure of angle 10 is 109 degrees. So I'm going to start with finding the measure of angle 4 because 5 and 4 make up supplementary angles. So if I subtract 94 from 180, I find that the measure of angle 4 is 86 degrees. They also told me the measure of angle 2. Since I see that angle 2 is 41 degrees, and I have my two parallel lines, and then this line down the middle makes a transversal. So it's what's making my two triangles, but it's my transversal between my two parallel lines. That means that angle 2 and angle 9 are alternate interior angles. If they're alternate interior angles, they're congruent. So angle 9 is also 41 degrees. Now that I know angle 4 and angle 9, I can figure out angle 3 because they're making a triangle. So I can subtract 86 and 41 from 180 to find that the measure of angle 3 is 53 degrees. 1, 2, and 3 are going to make supplementary angles. So if I subtract 53 and 41 from 180, I find that the measure of angle 1 is 86 degrees. I'm going to look for angle 8 next because 10, 9, and 8 make supplementary angles. So if I subtract 109 and 41 from 180, that gives me that the measure of angle 8 is 30 degrees. Now that I know angle 2 and angle 8, I can find angle 7, again using the fact that triangles have 180 degrees for their angle measures. So that gives me that the measure of angle 7 is 109. And then to find angle 6, I'm going to subtract 109 from 180 to find that 6 is 71 degrees. So again, we're combining all of those angles together, and we're using the different properties that happen when we have parallel lines with the transversals.